Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to be cracking open something a little different.
Intriguing.
Yeah, it's pages from, well, what seems to be an English language learning book.
Oh, very interesting. Not our usual subject matter.
Right. But I thought, who doesn't love a good language puzzle?
Indeed. It's always fascinating to see how other cultures approach language acquisition.
Exactly. So the title translates to the 1,000 most common words in the English language.
Sounds straightforward enough.
You'd think so, right?
Hmm.
But trust me, it gets really interesting when you see how they actually present these words.
Oh.
How so? Well, it's not just a random jumble of words. They've organized it all into these very specific sections.
So there's a method to their madness.
Exactly. Like, you've got time, family, colors, house, school, it goes on and on.
It sounds like they're almost building a world, one vocabulary word at a time.
That's a great way to put it. And it really makes you wonder why that particular order.
Good point. The order could be really telling. Maybe they start with more concrete concepts like, house or food,
Right.
before moving on to, say, more abstract ideas like time or verbs.
Yeah, sort of like building that language foundation brick by brick.
Precisely.
And speaking of building blocks, let's talk about the words themselves, the ones they chose for each section.
Yes. This is where things start to get really interesting because you'd think 1,000 most common words, that's pretty
Yeah.
standard.
Right, should be pretty cut and dry.
But even within those common words, there's room for some really interesting choices.
Absolutely. For example, I noticed in the family section, they include uncle and aunt,
Okay.
but they don't specify, maternal or paternal sides.
Interesting. So no aunt versus great aunt or any of those distinctions.
Nope. And that really got me thinking, because in some cultures, that difference is huge.
It's true. In some languages, you wouldn't even have the same word for your mother's brother and your father's brother.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder if they were trying to present a more, I don't know, universally relatable family structure.
Or maybe just trying to avoid a whole linguistics lesson on aunts and uncles.
Right. I mean, can you imagine? Lesson 1, how to navigate the complex web of familial relations.
It does make you realize, though, that even something as seemingly simple as a language learning book can't escape its cultural context.
That's like they say, language is a window into another culture.
Smudges and all.
Huh. Speaking of windows, check out the animals section.
What about it?
It's massive. I mean, we're talking everything from hippopotamus to vulture. Like a whole zoo exploded in here.
Wow. That's quite a menagerie. It could suggest a few things, don't you think?
Like what?
Well, maybe this book was designed for learners in a more rural environment.
Where they might encounter a wider variety of animals.
Exactly. Or perhaps it just reflects a curriculum that really emphasizes the natural world.
Interesting. Okay, get this in the time section. They have half hour and quarter hour.
Okay, pretty standard time divisions.
Yeah, but they're given as direct translations. So it makes you wonder, do they not have those concepts in their own language?
That's a really interesting point. We often take for granted how deeply ingrained our own concepts of time are.
Right.
In some cultures, those concepts might be expressed in entirely different ways, using verbs or metaphors instead of specific units of time.
Wow, mind blown. Okay, you flagged some memorable examples, and I have to know why. This is where things get juicy.
Absolutely. One thing that keeps popping up, especially in the animals section, is they pair adult and young animals together.
Okay.
So you'll have cat, kitten, hen, chicken, things like that.
Okay, I have to admit, when I saw hen chicken, I did chuckle a bit.
Right, like who needs a dictionary for that?
Uh-huh.
But then it made me wonder, why emphasize those pairings specifically?
Yeah, why not just chicken?
Exactly. It seems almost too obvious. Perhaps it's about teaching learners not just individual words, but also the relationships between them.
Oh, that's interesting.
A subtle way to introduce, say, life cycles or even family structures within a simple vocabulary lesson.
Sneaky teaching tactics.
Right. You barely even notice you're learning about something else along the way.
Very clever.
Yeah.
What other gems did you find?
Let's see. Oh, the jobs section was particularly revealing. We see housewife listed alongside professions like doctor and engineer.
Ooh, yeah, that one jumped out at me too.
It's one of those things that makes you think about the time period this book might be from and the societal roles it reflects.
And to top it off, they threw queen in there with all the other jobs.
Right. It's almost whimsical, isn't it?
It really is.
Adds a layer of humor and makes you wonder about the author's intent. Are they trying to make a subtle point about social hierarchy or...
Or just add a touch of lightheartedness to the lesson. This book is full of surprises. Speaking of which, The next section is titled Similar Words, and it's a doozy.
Similar words. Okay, let's hear it.
So they're grouping together words that sound alike, like tall, small, or catmatrat.
Ah, I see. So they're introducing the concept of minimal pairs.
Minimal pairs.
Yes. It's a common pedagogical technique where you present words that differ by just one sound.
Oh, I see.
That way, learners can really start to fine-tune their ear for those subtle but crucial phonetic differences.
Ah, that makes sense. Because, I mean, imagine mixing up hair and air. Talk about a bad hair day.
Precisely. These minimal pairs help learners avoid those kinds of comical and sometimes disastrous mix-ups.
And honestly, let's be real, it's just fun.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, who doesn't love a good tongue twister?
Right. Ox, fox, box. It's practically begging to be turned into a children's book.
You're not wrong. But before we get too carried away with the fun and games, let's not forget the practical side of all this wordplay.
Right, because learning to distinguish between these similar sounds is essential for any language learner.
Absolutely. It's the difference between understanding a conversation and feeling like you've wandered into a foreign film without subtitles.
It's true. And you know what else? It reminds me of those memes of the ones that are like, what I said versus what they heard. You know, where it's like a recipe for hilarious misunderstandings.
Oh, absolutely. The internet is full of those.
But yeah, those minimal pairs are like boot camp for your ears.
Training you to hear those subtle but crucial differences.
And as we've seen, they can be a lot of fun to play with. Speaking of fun, this next set really tickles my funny bone. Go good goat coat boat.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Why that set in particular?
Well, first of all, it's like they packed a whole vacation into 5 words. But on top of that, it showcases like a whole variety of vowel and consonant sounds.
Oh, I see it. You've got the G versus C in goat and coat, the long O in go, compared to the short O in boat.
Right. It's like a phonics sampler platter.
And now you've got me thinking about food. Any culinary delights hiding in the similar words section?
Funny you should mention that. This next set seems tailor-made for your foodie side. Dish, fish, wood, food.
It's like a culinary journey from the sea to the forest to your plate.
You know, this whole section is making me realize how much language is tied to our senses. It's not just about learning words. It's about, like, tasting them, smelling them, experiencing them.
Absolutely. Language has this incredible power to evoke such strong sensory experiences.
It's true. And I think that's why some of the most memorable learning moments are those aha moments, you know, when you finally make a connection, it just clicks.
Uh-huh. Moments indeed. Speaking of which,
This last pairing might just spark an aha moment or two for our listeners. You ready for this?
hit me with it.
Life. Feeling philosophical yet?
Well, how can you not with a pairing like that? It's like they took two simple words and opened up a whole can of worms about the human experience.
I know, right? It's almost as if the author snuck in a profound existential question under the guise of a vocabulary lesson.
Maybe that's the beauty of language learning, though, isn't it? It's not just about practical communication. It's about grappling with big ideas, emotions, even the very essence of what it means to exist.
Deep thoughts. From a language learning book of all things. Who would have thought?
It just goes to show you, you never know where a deep dive will take you. A gold mine, you said it. It's like they took all the fun word games, you know, and just snuck them into an educational book.
Seriously. Back again, everybody, and we are still knee-deep in the 1,000 most common words.
Still cracking those codes?
Right.
Yeah.
And they're, well, let's call it a unique approach to vocabulary. I think we left off with me convinced that this author was a comedian in disguise.
A comedian with a passion for language.
100%. But no, really, there's some clever stuff mixed in here. Like, take Dog Fog Log, for example. That's a children's book waiting to happen.
It really is. It's funny how these little groups of words, they can just like spark all these images in your mind, you know?
Holy.
Reminds us that learning a language, it's not just memorizing a definition, right?
No, not at all.
It's like opening up this whole world of like imagination and expression.
And sometimes miscommunication, let's be real.
Oh, absolutely. That's the spice of life.
Right. Got to make sure you don't mix up hair and air.
Eh.
Although that does sound like a pretty interesting salon mishap waiting to happen. But I digress. There are some word pairings here that are like, almost like actions, or mini-stories even, like Key Donkey Monkey. I don't know why, but I feel like that's a sitcom waiting to happen.
I can see it now. You've got this mischievous monkey. He gets hold of a key, unlocks the stable, and sets the donkey free.
The donkey's in on it, obviously. They're best friends.
Oh, without a doubt. It's a whole buddy comedy just waiting to be written. But it does make you think about The power of association when you're learning.
For sure.
You connect a word with a story, even if it's totally ridiculous, chances are you're going to remember it.
It's like those songs you can't get out of your head, but for vocabulary.
Exactly. Earworms for education.
Speaking of which, cut, nut, shit, go.
Oh, you think you can challenge me with a tongue twister?
I mean, I dare you to say that 5 times fast and not feel like you've just had a linguistics workout.
Challenge accepted. But on a serious note, you're right. The author knew what they were doing.
Oh, yeah.
Make it fun, make it memorable. The learning, that'll follow.
Spoonful of sugar helps the vocabulary go down. Now, speaking of sugar,
Are we taking a snack break?
not yet, but let's not forget that there's a practical side to all this wordplay. Like, learning to hear the difference between these sounds is so important for anyone learning any language, right?
100%. It's like this is the difference between actually understanding a conversation and feeling like you're watching a foreign film with no subtitles.
The struggle is real.
Imagine mixing up sheep and ship. That could lead to a bad travel experience.
That's fantastic. But you're right, these little minimal pairs, they're like a boot camp, but for your ears. They train you to hear those differences.
And as we've seen, they can be a lot of fun.
So much fun. Okay, this next set, are you ready for this? Go good goat coat boat.
Okay, you're on a roll with these. What's so special about that one?
It's like they crammed a whole vacation into 5 words.
Now that you mention it, it does feel kind of like a whirlwind adventure. You've got your transportation, your destination, even a furry friend to keep you company.
And maybe a snack, if you're feeling peckish.
Hopefully it's not packed in the box with the fox.
Too soon.
Maybe just a tad. But you're right, this whole section just makes you realize how much language is tied to our senses.
It's true.
We're not just like learning these words on a page, we're practically tasting them, smelling them, experiencing them firsthand.
And I think that's what makes it so memorable. You know, those aha
Yeah.
moments we were talking about.
Light bulb moment.
Exactly. They tend to happen when we can connect what we're learning to something we can see or hear or feel.
It's like suddenly the language comes alive. Speaking of coming alive, this last pairing, it might just spark an existential crisis or two.
Lay it on me.
Live life.
What do you think? Feeling philosophical yet? A little bit. It's incredible, right? How 2 little words can just open up these huge questions about, well, everything. The author snuck in an existential crisis disguised as vocabulary.
Maybe that's the mark of a truly great language learning tool. It doesn't just teach you the words, it makes you think, makes you question, makes you really engage with the world around you.
Deep Thoughts, brought to you by a language learning book.
Who knew, right?
This is why we deep dive. You know, it's amazing what we managed to find hidden in just a few pages.
Right. It seems so simple at first glance.
Like, who knew a list of common words could be so, well, revealing?
It's a good reminder that things are never just what they seem, right? There are always layers to uncover if you just know where to look.
This deep dive has definitely changed how I think about language. I mean, wow.
It really highlights the power of words, doesn't it?
It goes way beyond just memorizing vocabulary.
It's about connecting with culture, with history, with the way people think and experience the world.
Exactly. And who knows? Maybe this will inspire some of our listeners to, dust off those old textbooks or maybe even try learning a new language.
Now there's a thought. Can you imagine all the hidden treasures they might uncover?
Talk about a world of linguistic adventures waiting to be had. Well, folks, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the 1,000 most common words.
Simple words, maybe, but as we've seen, capable of sparking some pretty profound conversations.
It's true. So next time you come across a foreign language, don't just glance over it.
Take a moment, really listen to the sounds, think about the words, see if you can spot any of those cultural clues we talked about.
You might be surprised at what you discover.
Happy exploring, everyone.